Google, which has disappointed investors with its latest results.
Yeah, further proving that the more successful you get, the more difficult it is to please the people who've invested in your company, despite the fact that Google has managed to report pretty stellar earnings for the first 3 months of this year. Investors not at all impressed. Let's look at the headline figures. You can see revenues up by almost a fifth, profits up by 3% to $3.45 billion. But the cost per click is the important measure here. This is the amount of money that Google earns when people click on their ads. And the earnings that Google is making from that fell year on year during that period. And that's the measure that's worried investors. It's the key measure of how much Google earns from its business. And shares in the internet giant actually fell by 3% in after-hours trading after those results were announced, wiping billions of dollars off the value of the company.
Well, Stephen, I can imagine that news isn't helping the technology sector much, is it?
No, I mean, we've seen these falls recently on shares in the technology sector, a whole range across them, actually adding to these fears of a bubble in the tech sector. So Google, you can see, down 3%. Facebook also fell on after-hours trading, and Netflix, just one of the other American firms that was that hit by those results from Google. In fact, there are still rumblings in the technology sector and trading in Asia today. We had seen the Nikkei dip into the red earlier. It's just managed to crawl back into positive territories, but both technology and telecoms firms down in Tokyo, a slightly more flat picture across the rest of the Asian markets.
Well, staying with the technology sector, let's hear a bit about China's rival to Twitter.
Yes, Weibo has raised $285 million in its stock market debut in New York. The microblogging service priced its shares at $17 a piece, which is at the lower end of expectations, perhaps in response to those jitters in the tech sector. It sold 16.8 million shares, valuing the business at $3.8 billion. Profits at IBM slumped by more than a fifth in the first 3 months of this year. The world's largest technology services firm saw the biggest falls in its hardware division, hurt by the slowdown in China. The company is in the process of selling off its low-end server business to China's Lenovo as it tries to shift its business towards software and services.
Well, here in France next, and the Prime Minister has given some details of the spending cuts that the government is likely to make.
Yeah, that's right. 50 billion being that key figure that we know the government has to cut by 2017. We had got some idea before yesterday of where the money would be coming from, but Prime Minister Manuel Valls told us that 21 billion will be coming from pensions, social care and healthcare in those cuts that need to be made. Most social welfare payments, he said, except those affecting those on the lowest incomes, will be frozen until October 2015. Public sector salaries will also be held at their current levels until 2017. This all part of efforts by the government to bring its budget deficit below 3% by next year. Florence will have plenty more on that in the newspapers in just a moment. And we'll turn now to the Indian elections next, where the economy, as always, a very key issue when countries are going to the polls. Although unemployment levels are officially at less than 4%, there are structural problems in the Indian economy that the government's opponents say have been neglected for more than a decade. Carl Brown has more.
26-year-old Moj Khan lives in the village of Gasara, just 2 hours south of Delhi. One of a family of 12 living in one hut. Despite having a postgraduate degree, he's had to take low-paying farm jobs to help look after the family.
I have family expenses to meet, so I have to do something for work. Some people are working on the farm, some are working as daily wage labourers. These are the only employment options here, whether you're educated or illiterate.
Though India's official unemployment rate stands at just under 4%, much of that work is informal, and tens of millions of Indians are underemployed or inactive. The Bharatiya Janata Party, or BJP, is leading in the polls. It calls for increased investment and improved job prospects for skilled Indians. The ruling Congress Party says its critics' pro-business platform won't help the estimated 400 million Indians living in poverty.
Ours is a different way of thinking to the opposition. We're saying that certainly there should be development, definitely there should be growth, but the fruits of the growth should go to the poor, the economically weaker and the slum dwellers.
India's per capita income is estimated to have almost tripled between 2004 and 2012. But those gains have been unevenly distributed. And much of that growth, according to a report by the International Labour Organization, has created comparatively little employment in the formal economy.
Well, finally, one of the biggest mobile games is making its way to China.
Yes, hopefully new fans of Candy Crush can be found in China. The Chinese tech giant Tencent says it's launching a local version of the game for its 225 million users of its social networks. Candy Crush, of course, one of the mobile game phenomenons of recent years. It was one of the most downloaded apps in 2013. Hopefully good news too for the maker of Candy Crush, King Digital. They've seen their shares battered on the stock market since they launched back in March, down some 16%. Hopefully they might be able to attract some new users then in China.
I must give Candy Crush a go, I think. All right, Stephen, thanks very much for that update, a business update. Time now to look at what's grabbing the headlines here in France. First up, a look at Manuel Valls' flow, and his 50